Should I rent, buy a single family house, or house hack? When people ask whether they should buy a house or rent or which strategy is better, I would say I either say it's neither, or I would say it's a hybrid of the two, and that would be house hacking. So yes, it's true. In most areas, it's cheaper to rent than it is to own a home. But we're talking about, when people say that, people are talking about a primary residence, because you have to factor in taxes, insurance, other expenses, maintenance, repairs, all those things that you don't have to worry about as a renter. But the flip side of it is that, of course, the people that own their own property, the house that they live in, they also do get a benefit of some tax benefits. They also have the appreciation and the loan pay down that occurs. So those factors are not present when you're renting. But I know people have done some complex analysis and they've looked at this, and it depends on what city you're in, but they still say, well, the opportunity cost is lower with renting, because you can still save money while you're renting because you're not having to pay money for all those other different expenses that I just mentioned. And then you put that money in the stock market or somewhere else, another type of investment, and you're going to make passive, 10% or 8% year over year on that money. And you end up farther ahead than those people that are just owning their primary residence as opposed to renting. But to me, there's a third option that nobody talks about. And the third option is buying a rental property, a small multifamily rental property, which can also be your house. And that is house hacking. You're living in one of the units, you're renting out the other unit. So you've got the benefit of the appreciation, the loan pay down, the tax advantages, and you're living in the property typically for a reduced cost or almost free, if depending on how many units you have and how much rent you got coming in. And you're taking advantage of both of those things. So you may be living in a house hack for the same cost overall when you count all the expenses and you factor in your tenant's rent income that they're paying you at the same cost as if you were just renting somewhere else, right? If you were renting an apartment, you may have the same exact expense or the same exact expense structure. And so that still allows you to save money and do what other gurus are telling you when they're telling you should just rent and invest in the stock market. And you can still do that with a house hack. So you're taking advantage of both of those. And if you do any kind of metrics and you do some analysis on this, you're always coming out ahead with the house hacking strategy, ahead of both of those scenarios. You're coming out ahead of the renters, and you're coming out ahead of just the single family primary residence occupiers who are not utilizing any part of their property as a house hack to rent out to tenants. Let's say you could rent a 3-bedroom apartment or a house. Let's say you could rent a 3-bedroom house in your area, wherever you live, for $1,500 a month, plus your utility costs. So let's say $1,500 is your monthly rent payment to the landlord, and then you spend another $300 on your gas and electric, okay, every single month. So your all-in cost is $1,800. You don't have to worry about paying any taxes. You're not fixing anything in the property. You don't have to fix that boiler when it goes. You don't have to fix the roof or replace it. None of that stuff is your responsibility. If something breaks, you call up your landlord, and it's your landlord's responsibility to pay for it and to fix it and to incur that expense, right? So your all-in expense is $1,800. Now let's say that same house, if you were to buy it right now, is going to cost you $2,500 per month with just taxes, insurance, principal, and interest on your mortgage, right? $2,500 for those things. Well, that's still not accounting for the other expenses that you have that go along with that house. Same thing that a landlord would be responsible for, you are responsible for if that's your primary residence. So your repairs and maintenance, so if things break, that's on you. You have to spend that money. It's an actual cost. You can spread it out and calculate it over time, and you can figure out exactly what on a monthly basis that would come to. You have to replace the roof. Now, the roof is going to cost you $20,000. Maybe that expense won't occur for another 5 or 10 years, but it's going to occur. And so in order to account for that expense, you have to factor it on a monthly basis into your total housing cost of owning that house, right? So it's not just comparing $1,800 to $2,500. It's comparing what it'll be for those additional expenses. Now, you're living in that house, so $2,500 also does not include your utility costs. Just like you have utility costs when you're renting, you're going to have utility costs to the power companies when you own the house, right? So that's another $300 on top of that. So now you're talking about $2,500 was your principal and interest, taxes and insurance, another $300 for utilities. So now you're at $2,800. And let's say that all the other maintenance and repairs costs come to another $300, $400 per month. So now you're talking about being somewhere around $3,200 per month as your out-of-pocket expense to own this property versus $1,800 per month to live in that property, but to rent it, right? So the difference between those two, $1,400 per month, is something that in theory, the renter is saving. And that renter can then take that $1,400 that they would have spent if they owned that house and put that money in the stock market. And that money could earn them 7, 10, 8%, whatever it is over time, and grow and create wealth for them, right? The owner at the same time, no, they're not losing that entire $3,200, right? Some portion of that, probably $300, $400, $500 a month, is going toward paying off the mortgage on that house. So they are building equity in that sense, but it's obviously not at a $1,400 pace per month. It's somewhere around $500 to $600, especially in the beginning. And so that's why when people are comparing those two, they're saying, well, yes, the owner is going to have the benefit of loan pay down, and they could expect maybe a 3% growth on equity in their property, in addition to the equity pay down that they're realizing when they're paying off their mortgage. But still, when they're comparing the two between the owner and the renter who's investing in the stock market, investing that $1,400, they're saying that that renter would come ahead of the owner after a 25 or 30-year period. What I'm saying is that you want to be both. You want to get the benefit of both. If you could live in that single family house, you own that house, for your total entire expense would be $1,800, and you still then therefore have the $1,400 to invest in the stock market, you'd be able to do that. And the way you live in that house for $1,800 is you rent out some part of that house to a tenant who's paying off a large chunk of the rest of those expenses that I mentioned in our example. So maybe it's a granny apartment, maybe it's an in-law suite, maybe you've converted the garage that's detached. Now you have a rental income coming in. That's a way to house hack that house. And that's a way to get the best of both worlds. And that's a way to circumvent this entire argument. So the answer to the question is, should I buy or should I rent, is not rent or buy, it's buy a house hack. Hey guys, tap or click the screen in the corner for the next house hacking video you should watch. And if you want to go deeper with me and ask me your questions about house hacking or being a rental property owner, join me in my free private house hack mastery group on school.com. I post exclusive content and bonuses in that group, and you can connect with me and other like-minded investors. Also, if you're just getting started and thinking about buying your first house hack, grab your free copy of my house hack success checklist. Both links are in the description below.